The goddesses of destiny hang out below the tree of life, which is called Yggdrasil, where they weave together the fibers of everything living. So each thread represents somebody's life. And so in this particular scene, I picture this older sort of goddess creating a story about a particular person's life, and then you have kind of middle age also representing the present, and then you have youth also kind of representing the future. And I think in life, somebody who have sort of the perspective of experience tend to not be as shocked maybe or alarmed as somebody who is younger. So this is also a little bit like the story in a way as I chose to depict it.
How did you paint the drapery of the figures?
Yes, so all the garments is all painted from life. And after the composition, I would put like each drapery and each sort of garment on a mannequin, and I would paint it sort of to its completion. But this was also within mind of the holistic composition. So even if I was focusing on one area and pushing that all the way through to completion, it wasn't with a piecemeal mentality. It was very much still looking at and knowing how it would fit together with the other puzzle pieces. With the drapery right here, or with the tapestry of life, like that is very much a symbol I thought would be very suitable to represent the journey of life. And this spiral as a symbol exists sort of in nature. It exists in the galaxies. It exists in microcosm cultures across the world, and very often symbolizes that sort of journey of life. And I think also history is a little bit like a spiral. We have elements that repeat themselves all the time. Whereas there is a fluctuation that is different kind of in each time as well. So with the overall inspiration for the color and the pattern, I drew a lot of inspiration from the Book of Kells, which is a old gilded manuscript, which is currently housed at the Dublin Trinity College in Dublin. Yeah. So I was very intrigued by that kind of this color combination of rust red and purple and gold. And also in kind of Viking history, there is actually traces of silk that has been found in old Viking ships, which is very fascinating because it means that it was a connection to China back in the Viking age. So that's also something that I had in the back of my mind as I was working with this fabric, like this idea that there's a fabric combined with gold, which is an ancient metal, and silk, which is kind of a precious textile. So the tree, in a way, like this is kind of an abstract, kind of imaginary representation of a tree. And I was also thinking about how these, like this could be kind of the roots of the tree branching out, but it also assumes the shape of distant mountains. And because I was painting the whole composition here from imagination, I also wanted to make sure that I wasn't getting too detailed. So partly for that reason, I went in with kind of a mystic veil in order to keep it atmospheric and keep it simplified. But metaphorically, this to me also kind of suggests how life is very much something that unveils itself as it moves along. Like we don't know, we cannot predict what will happen in our lifetime or in our own individual lives.
How did you arrive at this composition?
This composition is very much a composite between different solutions. So it is partly painted from life, partly painted from imagination and memory, partly painted from photographic reference. So I actually painted this theme before I went to study at the Florence Academy of Art in a sort of smaller format. And then this is one of the themes that I wanted to revisit upon kind of graduating from Florence Academy of Art and having this kind of toolkit of drawing and painting. So it was very much a theme that I kept alive kind of within these years of study. where I would occasionally revisit it, sketch up some thumbnails and some compositions. So by the time that I invited in the models into my studio, I had a very specific composition in mind. And I actually did bring them in together because I wanted to make sure that they could communicate with each other. I wanted to make sure that the perspective was in sync. And then I placed them kind of with the exact distances in mind that I had in a way planned beforehand. To my mind, the language of hands is also a central part to this storytelling, where I very much wanted for her to kind of give energy and to point to us and kind of project an energy, whereas she is a little bit more kind of within herself, and she is of course a bit surprised, so kind of expressing surprise through the expression of hands. I also thought about how the placement of the hands kind of create different rhythms, and they also kind of form a number 8, which is a symbol of infinity. So there's a lot of layers to this particular composition where nothing is really coincidental. I also thought about how each hand is heights, so that it creates a nice element of a melody, of a rhythm, if you will. Because I felt that if one hand was in the same height as the other hand, we as humans tend to organize and tend to group things. So it's important to play around with asymmetries as a way to create an engaging composition, and to avoid the tendency that the eye and the mind would get stuck kind of looking at a tangent, for example.
Did your mental image of the subject change as you worked on the composition of this painting?
I kind of kept true to having these 3 different ages and having kind of the spacing of them fairly similar, and also this idea that they were sitting in front of a tree. But then I had maybe one version or a few versions where the tree was like covering all the way, or there would be more space or less space. I was working a lot with, and also what would happen with the loom. Like, this is very much an imaginary weave in a way. It's not how a loom scientifically appears, but I didn't want to get into the whole architecture of that. I was thinking much more in a kind of metaphoric, divine metaphor, or like how would this kind of weave of the goddesses appear. They also don't have any, they just hold the thread in a way. So it's not real in that regard. So it's not meant at all as a factual composition. It's much more an imaginative and metaphorically kind of tapestry of life.
What compels you to paint mythological subjects?
And it's very, I think, powerful with mythology because it is a archetypical treasure in a way. They are archetypical stories or representations of nature or natural phenomenon or people from the past in a way. So it's something that very much engage with one's cultural heritage, but also with life. And I think for that reason they're quite powerful.